Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And we have an exciting story behind this book today because it is, wow, amazing. The Last Man by Thomas Goodman. And hi, Thomas.
Hi, I'm glad to be on your program today.
Do you like to be called Tom or Thomas or?
Either one will work. Most people call me Tom.
Okay, I'll call you Tom too. My brother's name
Okay,
is Tom, so that works out. All
okay.
right, where do I start with you? This is an amazing book. This is completely. I get a lot of books, but so many books. I just got 12 books the other day. When you contacted me about this book, I was not sure about it. The 1927 Santa Claus bank robbery. I thought, what is this book? And now you're telling me it's your debut book.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
it's incredible. I've had a lot of debut books, but this is really quite amazing.
I appreciate those words. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
I'm not the only one who feels that way because you've gotten a lot of awards for a debut book. To get so many awards and to get such wonderful recognition, that's pretty fantastic. Let's look at some. My goodness, it's so exciting. You got the 2024 Spur Award. You got the 2024 Will Rogers Medallion Award. You got the grand prize winner of the 2023 Chanticleer Laramie Award for American Fiction. And this doesn't happen to very many first time authors. It just doesn't happen. It's just so thrilling to see this.
Yeah, I've had to say pinch me a few times when I got those notices come in.
You should. It's just so exciting. I love to see an author get such recognition so fast. And it's your first, but I know there's going to be many after this. This one is quite unusual. It's an unusual story. So you're going to tell us a little bit in a minute about how you found the story. And there's a bad Santa. So we have a bad Santa up there. But it is a story it is really an irresistible mix of fact and fiction. And you've combined it. And the research that went into it. And then we're going to talk later on after we talk about the book, we're going to talk about how you became such a great writer. But let's start with the story of how you discovered this story and ran with it.
Yeah, I lived in Eastland County in the 1990s where this true crime took place in the 1920s. And so I was often told about the most famous or infamous crime of the county when I lived there. And I'm a bit of a history nerd, so I collected as much information as I could. Newspapers.com didn't exist back in the 90s, but I was retrieve as much information as I could, and there's a lot of information out there. It may not be a well-known story today, but it could have been the equivalent of the OJ trial for the 1920s. It was front page news, top of the fold for almost 2 years in Texas newspapers, but also in national newspapers. New York Times picked it up some during the 2 years of drama. And I lived just 4 blocks away in the 1990s from the place where they dragged one of the robbers out of the Eastland County Jail in the 1920s.
Let's start with Cisco, and
Yes.
it's a town, and it's near Abilene, which I love that song Abilene. My father really loved old Western movies, and I watched all the old Western movies. And Abilene, I think after I saw that with him for years, I was always that song. So let's go back to Abilene, and let's go over to Cisco, which is not too far away. So tell us
Right.
about Cisco, Texas is a very special place. This is in the middle of nowhere. Uh,
Right.
so tell us about
Yeah.
Cisco.
Yeah. Eastland County is made up a number of towns, but I guess the three principal towns would be Eastland, Cisco, and Ranger. And they all sit in between Abilene and Fort Worth today, anyway, Interstate 20. And so in 1927, 2 days before Christmas, Marshall Ratliff decided to rob his hometown bank, the First National Bank of Cisco. But he would be immediately known by people there. And so to disguise himself, he dressed as Santa Claus. Like I said, it was 2 days before Christmas, and he thought this would be a way of not raising any suspicion that you put a bandana over your face before you leave the street and go into a bank. Somebody gets suspicious right away. He had three companions with him, and it was supposed to be this in and out 3 minute heist. There was a front door on Main Street. There was a side door into an alleyway. They were going to park their car in the alleyway, go into the bank, rob the place, go out the alleyway door, and be out in 3 minutes. But it went sideways fast, in part because of a new and controversial reward called the dead bank robber reward. At that time, an average of four banks per day were being hit in Texas by robbers. And so the Texas Bankers Association hoped to tide by offering $5,000 for a dead bank robber, and the poster said, and not 1 cent for a live one. And $5,000 is about $85,000 in today's terms. It's 2 years' pay for a working man. It drew a lot of attention. And as soon as word got out that the bank was in the process of being robbed, lawmen and citizens surrounded the bank from the front of the alleyway and the back of the alleyway and started shooting at anyone who stuck his head out that alleyway door. So the guys took human shields, just bank employees and customers, including two fourth grade girls, and brought them out with them to keep from being killed. Now they weren't just worried about being arrested, they were worried about being killed. And so they're in desperation at this point, and they use these people as human shields. They get out of town in their getaway car with the two fourth grade girls in their laps, and that begins the largest manhunt in Texas. It takes.
Okay,
Go ahead.
let's stop. Let's stop.
Okay.
I don't want to give too much away because what is so fantastic about this book? It is so suspenseful. It is. There are so many elements to this, and it is really. But the title gives a lot away. The Last Man. So that's why
Right.
we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen to any of these people. As you're
Right.
reading this book, I want to tell people don't Google it, don't do anything. Just read the book and have the reveals. What I always look for in all thrillers that I read, I want a reveal. And so often I guess the reveal way before anybody else does. I know how it's going to end, I know what's going to happen, but boy, this reveal, there's a last man standing, and it is the story that you write. You've taken these different points of view and you write such a compelling story. It's so exciting. I can see why. And I was really happy that you got the Will Rogers because I love Will Rogers. The reveal here, the way you've done it, this is so sophisticated, really. It's really so sophisticated writing.
I appreciate that. When I lived in Eastland, nobody really talked much about the last survivor of these four guys, and I always wanted to know what. And I would ask people what happened to the last man, because when the story gets told every 3 or 4 years or so, Texas Monthly, Texas Highways, national newspapers, they'll cover the story, usually around Christmas time, even though it's not a Christmas tale, but a gun-toting Santa Claus bank robber going to tell it at that time. But it always ends the deaths, and the last man, the last survivor, just disappears into obscurity. And I always wanted to know if anything interesting happened to him. And of course, indeed, some really interesting things happened to him. And his part of the story is as much a part of the Santa Claus bank robbery story as anything else that was told of the deaths of the other three.
Let's go back and we'll lay some more of this groundwork about. It's amazing when you think about it. 3 or 4 bank robberies a day. I mean,
Right.
tell us about this period of time because you've done a lot of research here. Tell us about what was going on, and I think this is what I mean. People have heard, of course, of Bonnie and Clyde and all of these. They also loved robbing banks. A few years later, I think they were after
Right.
this. So just tell us some of this history that you've discovered because this is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, Bonnie and Clyde would have been just after this in the 1930s, and this took place in 1927. Clyde Barrow was probably in one of the work farms at the same time as one or two of these bandits after they were captured, but there's no indication that they ran across or knew of each other. But I think that when we see the old, you talked about the old westerns and the old gangster movies and that kind of thing, and there would usually be a guard in the lobby of the bank, and that had to have developed later because in the 1920s, at least in these smaller towns, that was not the case. And so the dead bank robber reward, as bizarre as it sounds, in some defense to the Texas Bankers Association, I think they were trying to for all practical purposes, deputize citizens to help protect their investments in the bank.
And now this is before bank robberies were a federal crime, right?
That's a good question. I know that they were never brought up on federal charges. Now, the robbery of a train was a federal crime right from the start, but I guess I'll have to check into that to see. Once you had federally insured banks, then it became a federal crime, but this would have been before that.
We have this all these people robbing banks. It's so funny, really, when you think about it now.
Mm.
We have bank robbers now, which it always seemed like a stupid crime to me. But now that
Mm.
you say that there weren't any guards at the door, that
Mm.
that sort of adds to it. And really, the
Right.
FBI came along after this, and as a result of sort of that's when they started with the public enemy. What was that program they had?
Yeah, so that would have happened in what, the late 30s and early 40s at the earliest on that. Killers of the Flower Moon is a wonderful book, and it's a nonfiction account of the early formation of the FBI. That all took place a little bit after this story. So I think that, of course, bank employees had weapons. They had pistols themselves in the drawers. But if somebody's quicker with the draw, they've already drawn down on you, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get that pistol out of there. And so, yeah, this dead bank robber reward was controversial from the start. Frank Hamer, famous Texas Ranger, who in the end was the one credited with killing Bonnie and Clyde, but he wrote a open letter that was published in all kinds of Texas newspapers complaining about this dead bank robbery reward. He felt it would lead to vigilantism, and it did almost immediately. About a month before the Santa Claus bank robbery in Stanton, Texas, a deputy lined up three laborers beside a bank in the night, got them drunk, lined them up beside this bank, and shot them, and then wanted to claim the reward, $5,000 for each dead bank robber. And his plan fell apart when two of those three men survived and talked about their ordeal. Yeah, it was ripe for abuse, but it was certainly a very attractive reward as well, considering, like I said, the equivalent of $85,000 in today's money.
And you mentioned the Texas Rangers. That was that was a police force, a major police force
Right.
in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, and all levels of police enforcement were used in this manhunt. Like I said, it was a 7-day manhunt, and county, local, and of course Texas Rangers were all used to bring these guys in.
Without telling anything about who is the last one, but tell us about the four guys. Just sort of paint the picture of who they were and why they got to this point where they're going to
Yeah.
rob a bank just before Christmas. What do they need money for Christmas stockings?
Hmm.
What was the idea
Right.
here?
One, this was his first adventure into crime. He was a last minute recruit, and he was the brother in law of one of the guys,
Which
never
one?
committed a crime.
Which
That would have been Lewis Davis.
so Lewis
And
Davis.
mhm. And then there was
And
Henry
I mean,
Helms.
was he? He's originally from Cisco, so people know him in Cisco.
No, Marshall Ratliff, the ringleader of the gang, would have been from Cisco. Yeah, Lewis Davis was from Wichita Falls. His brother-in-law was also from Wichita Falls, Henry Helms. Marshall Ratliff was the ringleader of the gang who could talk anybody into anything. Henry Helms would have been the muscle of the gang. And he was portrayed, among all four of them, he was portrayed as the most unpleasant when he was on trial. He had been in Huntsville on an armed robbery charge, 25-year sentence. And that's where he met Marshall Ratliff, who was also on a separate armed robbery charge, 25-year sentence. And they were released only 2 years into their sentences. A governor at the time, Miriam or Ma Ferguson, had a record number of early releases. And I think there's enough evidence now that we can confidently say it was pardons for bribes. But at any rate, these men walked out of the Huntsville prison completely unrepentant because the ringleader, Marshall Ratliff, immediately went to Wichita Falls to recruit Henry Helms to come down and rob his hometown bank. And so they obviously had not changed their minds on their ability to get away with bank robbing. The fourth guy, Bobby Hill, Robert Hill, he met Marshall in Huntsville as well. He was there for not an armed robbery charge. He was there for a 2-year sentence for breaking and entering. But he was an orphan boy, and I think he went in with Marshall, and when people saw how popular Marshall was and that Bobby hung with him, they didn't bother Bobby any. And I think he was very susceptible to Marshall's influence when he recruited him to join him in the hometown bank heist as well.
So but they were just kids, guys who came from
A
relatively
couple
poor
of
families, or none of them had real employment or occupations.
Yeah, Lewis Davis, his first adventure into crime was this. He was a family, what, three kids, I think it was. He was employed at a time where it was already in areas like Texas already starting to get harder to find employment. The Great Depression would happen just a couple of years later. And so this was really pretty foolhardy on his part. The other three, as even today, it's difficult for people who have a felony conviction to be able to get gainful employment, and that was the case then as well. And I'm not sure how hard they tried to find gainful employment once they got out of Huntsville, but it would have been difficult for them to do. I imagine it was easier just to think about a big heist, a big score.
And I think Texas having this past of being Wild West, it's interesting that Bonnie of the Bonnie and Clyde, Bonnie was born not far from Cisco.
And definitely had a Dallas connection. I'm not familiar if she had a Cisco connection. That's a different story. I'll have to look into that.
Her hometown is not far from Cisco. I think
Okay.
between Abilene and Cisco. So now you said the word portray. I love that when you said that, because right away I was thinking, whoa, has this been a movie yet?
Oh,
You discovered this story, which, as you said, has been repeated in local papers and things over the years, but nobody's made a movie of this yet.
no, although it's come close a couple of times. John Lee Hancock, who did The Blind Side and the Netflix special, The Highwayman, about Frank Hamer. John Lee Hancock, when he left law, because he started out as a lawyer, when he left law, he wanted to go into movies. His first stab at a screenplay was the Santa Claus bank robbery, but it never got picked up, and maybe it didn't get picked up because it didn't include the story of the last man.
That's it. That's it. You have created the story. You have created the film. We are going to see this as a film. I know somebody's going to pick it up. You've won these awards. And like a wild horse, you're running out there and you have really just clinched it. Anybody who wants to make a movie about this is going to have to buy your book. So you're
I,
going to
I
have to go
appreciate
through
that. It goes without saying that would be very exciting. Any writer would love that kind of exposure for sure. And I just love this story. This book is based on a true story. So when I say I love this story, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm trying to talk about the actual story out of the Associated Press. It's just been so fascinating to me. And I think it would make a compelling movie. And one of my early readers used the word cinematic. He said that the book
Oh,
itself
it's cinematic. Now,
was cinematic.
I've worked in Hollywood. I was given books to write a script for that had nothing in it.
Mm.
I wrote a script where I actually used only 120 words out of the entire book. I had to make up a lot of it because it they had bought the book, they paid the guy. But
Yeah.
in your case, oh, the screenwriter who gets this book is going to be so happy with this book. Oh, the screenwriter is going to pop the champagne cork on the day he gets it. He's not going to wait till the end.
I appreciate you saying that, and coming from the perspective of somebody who's written screenplays and turned books into screenplays
Yeah.
before, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
really gratifying to hear you say that.
Oh, this is a cinch. This is a joy. Somebody's going to be so happy. We're talking joy on paper. The
Yeah.
script writer is going to be so happy because you've got it. The story is here, everything. And of course, it is the ending because there is throughout this story the sort of the hope, at least, that somebody will be redeemed. There's a hope that it's not everybody's bad in this world, that there is goodness, that people who maybe do the wrong thing, maybe some of them will turn out okay. You don't know. And that's
Mhm.
why this
Mhm.
book is so much fun, because you don't know.
Mhm.
You don't know which one. And which
Mhm.
one is 19 years old at the start?
Robert Hill or Bobby Hill,
Bobby Hill
he would
was
have been.
19.
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
hope, and for the others too, the one who has three kids, you say, "Boy," and you
Mhm.
hope. And that's why the book is so good. That's why the book is so
Mhm.
exciting, because you don't know and you want to know and you keep turning the pages.
Yeah. When I get a chance to speak about this in Rotary clubs or that kind of thing. I decided really early on that I would tell the story by saying, and the first guy did this, and the second guy did this, and the third guy, because early on, my readers were saying, don't tell me who the last survivor is. I want to try to guess as I read through this book.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it turned out to be pretty entertaining for the reader to take a guess and, of course, put your hopes on this person being the last man, and then he's killed, and so it makes hopefully a bit of a page turner. It was you talked about when you first received the book, or the idea of the book, and you thought you just didn't know what to make of it. And I think that the book was, it received immediate interest from some agents, but I never got picked up by an agent. And I think in part because it's told from four different perspectives, right? It was impossible to tell the story from one perspective. So I had to go into the omniscient point of view, because as you've read the book, immediately after they are captured and put on trial, they're often three different sections by that point. Couldn't have one person tell the whole story. By laying out four different perspectives, it also, I think, created a tension for the reader to root for one person or another to be the last survivor.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. And that's why it's so thrilling. And that whole the element of suspense is always great to keep people turning the pages. It's just so much fun.
Mhm.
Wow. And you have a lot of other characters in there too. When you did a massive amount of research here. So how many years altogether have you been working on this book? Off and on?
Once I Off and on, probably 25 years. It came out last year, but and remember, I lived in the county in the 90s. I'm not exactly sure I would say I was starting consciously to collect information to write it. I'm just, as I mentioned earlier, a history nerd, and so I collect information on certain interesting aspects of history just because they interest me, not because I can do something with it. I would say on and off, maybe 25 years, until I finally decided, you know what, I think I need to be the one to write the rest of the story and complete the story by talking about the last man.
And you mentioned that you've already been doing speeches, you've been doing events, going out. How did First of all, how did you win these awards so quickly? How did who got you? You Are you working with a major publicist for a first
I
book? This is an unusual. You hit it so strong. It's just makes me crazy to think
well,
about it.
Thank you. No, I'm an independent author and an independent publisher, so I guess I'm also an independent marketer. I have to. One of the things I realized, there's a whole world of independent publishing out there that I knew nothing about as a reader, about the big five publishers, or I guess it's now the big four publishers and their subsidiaries. But there's this whole world of independent publishing out there and small presses. I mentioned earlier that I got some interest from some agents, but nobody took me on. And so I finally decided,
Oh, they're going to
you
be
know, time.
sorry. They're going to be sorry.
So I went through Ingram and set up my own publishing company, Mainsail Media, Mainsail Books. And but I these awards are usually, there's a time limit. Your book has to have been published within a certain amount of time for that year's award to be granted to you. The book came out late in 2023. It came out in October, so I was pretty close to the deadlines for submitting to Spur Award, Will Rogers Award, and Chanticleer. And like I said, when those notices came in, it was a pinch me moment. I'll tell you though, Joy, what was even more gratifying, my goodness, how can anything be more gratifying than getting an award recognition? But early on, some established writers like James Wade agreed to take on the book, look at it, and if he liked it, he would give me a blurb. And he read it, he liked it, he gave me a blurb, and that gave me some open doors as well, because when an established author kind of endorses the book, that gives some other people a chance to go, okay, this book sounded weird at first, but maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, you did. Again, that's why I couldn't figure out your self-published how you got did this because it's not easy to get, first of all, to get awards. It's the process. Most new authors have no idea how to do it. Then most authors, even published authors, don't know how to get such wonderful blurbs. You're getting the most
Mhm.
incredible blurbs. Some of them just, again, for a self-published author to do this is so great. And I love this one. If you're interested in a really wacky bank robbery and the aftermath thereof, or just a weird moment in Texas history, you'll zip through this book and then you'll want to give it to someone else of a like mind. And this is a fantastic, just that alone. You put that on a cover and
Mhm.
people will be intrigued. You have
Yeah.
so many, but really, thank you, Glenn Drumgoole, former
Yep.
editor of the Abilene Reporter News. I just get such a kick out of Abilene. I love Abilene. I'm going to be singing
Yeah.
that song for weeks now. Co-owner of the Texas Star Trading Company. That is a beautiful blurb. That is a blurb written by somebody who really. Sometimes you read blurbs, and I know that the people read it and read the book, and they like you and they want to give you something nice. This is written by somebody who was thrilled with the book. This is written by somebody who loves the book. This is written by
Yeah.
somebody who it's a beautiful
Yeah.
blurb. That's why I wanted people to just hear it. It's just I love this
Yeah.
guy.
I was so pleased to receive that. Glenn and his wife have been fantastic supporters of the book at the Texas Star Trading Company in Abilene, and as I'm sure brick and mortar stores are. They struggle so much these days, and so it's wonderful to have. I've forgotten how many brick and mortar stores that are picking it up. Sometimes displaying it on the counter was a last minute decision right at Christmas time for somebody to pick it up and go, "What's this all about?" Um, but also with Glenn being former editor of the Abilene newspaper, that it was just I was really tickled with that too.
Yeah, I got such a kick out of it. I love all the other ones. And people, when you go to the Amazon page or you might go to Tom's website and see more, they're all great. They're original blurbs. They're not formatted. They're
Mm,
real. These are from people who really love the book. And like me, I think exactly what happened when you mentioned the word cinematic. I always know if I'm going to really care about a book is if by the time I get to page 10, I start seeing it
mm,
as a movie in my head and I forget that I'm reading. That
mm,
happened, I think, about page 4. I got to
mm.
page 4 with your book and I said, this is, I can see it. It's so cinematic. It's so well done. And just, wow. Wow.
Thank you so much for that.
So,
It was fun researching it. And somebody asked me, "Do you enjoy writing?" And my answer was, "I enjoy having written." So you're you with your screenplays and everything that too. The struggle of the writing until you experience the moments of breakthrough and everything, it can often be frustrating. But looking at it afterwards and hoping that somebody will like it now that you've written it, that's a fun thing.
okay, so are you going to, for this book, are you going to be doing events? You have more events coming up in the future?
Uh, I do, and of course, I'll try to say yes to any invitation that's out there. But I think the all the research I've done on the book, on the business of the book world, after 14 months or so, interest will drop off. And
Yeah.
so, with this book, I think that the interest can revive the last 3 months of the year: September, October, November, December. So, 4 months of the year leading up to Christmas, with a gun-toting Santa Claus on the cover. It may end up being a perennial
An
type
evergreen,
marketing opportunity.
an evergreen.
Hmm.
We always liked. It's always great when you have an evergreen. A book, like if it's a book about D-Day, it can come out a few months ahead. If
Right.
it's a book about Pearl Harbor, it can come out. And this one, because of the Christmas element, it can come out. That's an evergreen. So you'll have sales forever, year after year.
Hmm.
So until you're 102. So you don't have to worry. That part is nice, but you still need to keep it going and build it up because but you're smart, you are really, you're obviously, you have incredible talent, not just as a writer but also as somebody who can do things, because
Hmm.
so many self-published authors, they get to this point. I've got a few that I've reviewed recently. They're fantastic books, fantastic, but the writers don't know how to do this, but you're great.
I appreciate that. It is a business, and even if you go with a traditional publisher these days, unless you're a famous name already, you are going to do your own marketing. If you just breathe a sigh of relief that you put the last period at the last sentence, and then the
Doesn't work.
publisher gives you a beautiful cover and it's out there in the bookstores, but you, if you're expecting the publisher to do marketing for you, you are going to be disappointed again, unless you're already famous. So I would say do all the reading you can, go out all conferences you can, not just on the craft of writing, but the business of book selling, because it's going to be so much on you until you become a famous name.
Speaking of the craft of writing, I want to now switch over to talking not about the book. Everybody, the book is amazing. You have to read it. It's just a great read. But I want to talk now about your talent, because this is something, wow, this is so exciting. Because I, when I see a book and I start reading and I start looking at the words, I have this ability. It's strange. I sometimes I remember exact passages from a book, or I remember every word in a sentence, and they will stay with me a long time after I've read it. But you I don't know where you came out with some of these things, and I want to see understand your process, because I remember one sentence. It's a bead of coffee rested on the lip of his cup. Now, that is such a simple sentence. Writers ask me all the time, and we just recently went through NaNoWriMo, National
Mhm.
Novel Writing Month, and they'll ask me, how can I make something, how can I make it interesting? And I say, you have to be observant, or I don't know how. You just got to think. But that is so good. It's one little bit of a sentence. A bead of coffee rested on the lip of his cup. Now, that's so evocative. It tells you so much in that one little bit. Or
Mhm.
then you have another place where you say buck teeth about a girl. She has buck teeth jutting out of her wide smile. And this was not written by AI. You are not AI, are you?
No,
AI
no,
didn't write that, right? That came from your brain.
right.
Yike! Isn't that wonderful? There's something in your brain that can do that?
It was fun to try to picture these people visually, but also picture how they were talking to each other, and to try to do it in as natural a way as possible. So I very much appreciate that. Um, those of us who write, we write for months or even for years, and it's just us and the keyboard and that dang blinking cursor, and and so it's really gratifying once the words get out and you start interacting with people who've read it, that they saw the same things you were seeing, or they appreciate what you were trying to convey to them. So thank you for that.
I'm getting, I, as I said, I get so many books, and I'm getting a lot of books where I know 100% the people are using a thesaurus for a different word.
Mm,
I don't want to use that same word. And you know it. They don't feel that word.
mm,
It didn't come to their mind. And I
mm,
get
mm,
so crazy about this. I hate all of this. And even something as simple, and what I tell people is you don't need fancy words. You don't need big words. You don't need to
mm,
play all around. All the words that you need are in your head somewhere, because you've heard them
mm,
over and over all your life. And a simple sentence, another place you wrote, he kept an edge, he kept an edgy eye on the officer. Now, oh, that says so much. He kept an edgy eye. People don't write that. You don't see that
mm,
kind of writing very often. He stared at they'll have all sorts of other things. And does it just come out of you like that? What's in that brain of yours? It's a great brain.
I thank you so much. I One of the things that is certainly helpful for those of us who write is to have a writers group, a writers meetup, and I have three other writers. Only one writes in somewhat of similar genre to me, but it's still interesting to hear the insights of the other two as well. And so I'm not writing for them, but I'm writing because I have to have something to give them each month, and that actually helps. It certainly helps when, if one of them comments about how you use the word evocative, how evocative a phrase is or an image is, that that kind of fires up a writer to make sure that some more of that shows up in subsequent writings that you submit to your meetup group. And you are right about the thesaurus. Obviously, when you're trying to come up with a word because you've used the word gun too many times. And so you're trying to remember what other words you can use in that scene other than gun. That's useful. But there was a writer whose name I've forgotten now, but he said in an article I read that if you have to reach for the thesaurus, don't. In other words, you're going to come up with some word that isn't natural to you, and you're going to end up alienating the reader as well. One thing that is a little difficult for those of us who are most writers are avid readers, and so our vocabulary, we're not trying to show off a vocabulary, but our vocabulary goes up over time because of just the amount of words we see and the reading we do. But we do have to, I think, be mindful as writers that need to not come off more highfalutin than we are. That's a good Texas way of saying it. So
Exactly. Oh, I don't like when writers dumb down their writing, because
mm,
if they know the words and they're using the words as part of their entire being, it's their
mm,
voice. Then you
mhm,
recognize that. But then
right.
on the other hand, with so many of these programs now, they're writing and then the program offers them options. You might
Yeah.
want to use this. You might think of using that. Just stop
Mhm,
it. Just
mhm,
pull it out of you. Just pull it out
mm,
of you, because I'm a simple sentence. I'm simple. Kept an edgy eye. It's
yeah,
just so beautiful.
mm.
I was so happy. So happy. Oh, it's amazing. I get so thrilled by something little like that, because of the 12 books that I got recently, I'm only going to do 3 of them. I give them a chance. So
Yeah.
I will read sort of like an agent, like if they were
Mhm.
sending it to me and they wanted me to be their agent. I do know an agent who she has rejected a few authors over the years. That she is so sorry. She's so
Oh,
sorry.
and in fairness, I read an article one time that most agents get, what is it, 200 inquiries
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah.
That actually may be low, and of course with the electronic way of turning in queries and that kind of thing, that's obviously great for the writer and it's great for the agent. But it also makes it so much easier to turn in a two-page query or something through the electronic means. So they've got to just be inundated. I have no doubt that for a lot of us who are writers, it wasn't that an agent considered our work and rejected us. They just ran out of they pulling out of what they call their slow, and looking through, they found enough that they were satisfied with to work with for this period of time. And so yours didn't even get a look, not because it wasn't worth it, but just because just the sheer volume.
You wrote query letters to
Oh
writing
yes,
query. Oh, how many query
yes.
letters?
Oh, I can't remember at this point. I really should be prepared for that question. Should have been prepared for that question, and got to do it up. I used a program called Query Tracker, so I should be able to come up with the total number of queries and how many people actually ask follow up questions. And I'll be prepared next time somebody asks me that question. But I would say one of the things I love writers' conferences. I've been to several big writers' conferences. I've learned a lot about the craft of writing and the business of writing at those conferences. My one complaint would be that writers' conferences are very slow at recognizing that 80% of the people who show up at a writer's conference and have a book idea, they're not going to get picked up by an agent or by one of the big five. They should pursue that. We should all pursue that because of the validation of having somebody who's in the book business say, I like this. I think I can sell this. But don't feel like your writing hopes are sunk if you don't get an agent or you don't get a big five publisher. There's this thriving world of independent and small press out there.
Your hopes just
Mhm.
shouldn't be dashed. You have to keep going.
Right.
That's the name of the game. You have to keep going. And you certainly have done that with this book. How did you feel that joy of writing when you got a sentence right, when you got something right? Do you keep a collection of your best sentences? Do you have a list of your best sentences? Like
Uh,
what I
y-
pulled out. I
that,
mean, what I have as part of your best sentences. Do you keep a list?
that's a good idea. I don't keep a list in the writing process before the writing is done. I keep a list of other people's turns of phrases. I don't plagiarize them, but when I'm reading and I run across a phrase or I read a scene and I go, Oh, now I'm not just reading it as a reader, I'm reading it as a writer, and I start picking it apart. I guess that's the liability that all of us have when we start reading other people's writing as a writer. You start picking it apart, going, how did he or she do that? That's so beautiful how they did that. And so I have some little images or phrases that I just, when I'm reading a novel, I'll open up my notes app on my phone and write down some of those phrases. Again, for inspiration.
I switched my glasses because I wanted to go back and look where you use a phrase that is so good. While I'm doing this, I had to put on my reading glasses. I have to switch my glasses because these are non-shine glasses so I can see the screen. What you've done bringing these four characters to life with all their flaws, this is a major accomplishment.
Thank you so much. And like I said, it's so gratifying when you write alone as a writer and then you start getting response and feedback from it. That's the really gratifying part.
So, what are you doing now? You're writing. You have to continue writing. You've got
I'm I
lots of
ran
years ahead
across
of
a
you.
I ran across another story also in Texas, true crime. It's in earlier than this story. It's set in 1906 in East Texas, a small town, and the main character of their town was informally dubbed as the pistol packing preacher. Now, just that title, you want to learn a little bit more, right? It sounds, even in the piney woods of East Texas in 1906, it sounds very much like those old westerns you used to like to watch on screen, with this guy coming in and seeing the violent and vicious elements have taken over the town. And I'll shorten the story considerably for this podcast, but he, in the end, rallies all these common townsmen, the grocer and the accountant and the barber and the banker, not violent men, but he goes in Carrie Nation style and smashes up all the establishments where such deterioration and destruction had been brought to his town. So he was known as the pistol packing preacher, in part because he was deputized by the sheriff so he could carry, because his life was under threat by all these elements he was confronting. And on Sundays, he'd put the pistol on the pulpit as a visual that nobody was to
Oh,
come into that church and mess with that church while he was Sunday service. So it's a very old style Western, even though it's set almost in the old South, because the piney woods of Texas is basically Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all rolled into one. But anyway,
oh. This the
so
second book won't take you as long to write. Uh,
oh, I hope not. I'm on chapter 7 right now. It's slow going. I write from about 6 in the morning till 8:30 in the morning, and I think I told you before we started recording this that I'm a pastor by career, and so when the office is open at 8:30, I feel like I'm on the clock at that point until then. But it does give you a certain urgency to try to get something out before the 8:30 bell goes off.
yeah, because then you're gonna have to work on your sermon. I think I have to
That's
come to
right.
your I have to come to your church. You must give some rip rousing sermons.
I appreciate. Yeah, come on. You and I corresponded earlier, and you said you're permanently in Austin now, in Austin,
Yeah,
Texas. I've been for the last 21 years. It's just Hillcrest.church. Our extension isn't .org, .net, or whatever, but Hillcrest.church. And yeah, I'd love
yeah.
to have you and anybody else. We have a streaming service, so if somebody doesn't live in Austin, just drop
They
in
can
at Hillcrest.church on Sundays.
a preacher who can write a good sermon is also very precious because they're not all great writers. It's good that they have quotations to use from the Bible
That's right.
because you're sure to get something good out of that. But what I love about the book is the idea of redemption and that
Mm.
there are good people in this world. This is a great book. It is a wonderful gift book. It will appeal to both men and women. Guys will just love it from one side, and women will love it from the other side, the love side, the hopeful
Mm.
side, the human side. And the guys will love it from the adventure side. And it's a read that you feel really good at the end. When you get to the end, although you start off with a bad Santa.
I had one of my early readers say it's like Southern Gothic with a happy ending, and he was being tongue in cheek because Southern Gothic as a genre has no happy ending, but it's so grim and sad through so much of the book, through bad luck and bad choices. And then it turns there at the end, becomes. I never thought I would write a romance. It's not a romance novel, but there's a
Yeah,
love story at
it is.
the end. And so
There's a lot of love in this book too. So it's a wonderful book. I think it's just a terrific. You're going to get lots more prizes.
there's a window on most prizes, Patsy. Your book has to have been published within a certain.
Certainly,
Now there are some prizes that are available for books that came out even 5 years ago.
I hope you get some more recognition. You deserve it. It's well written, amazing debut book. And here's your website, Thomas Goodman Writes, and people can
Yes,
go there and find out more about
yes,
you. And they
yes.
can,
And I'll just add real quickly, there is a 26-page photo booklet that they can download for free from that website called the Santa Claus Bank Robbery in Photos. And so it has photos of the actual robbers, the officers who were killed in the shootout, the children who were taken as hostage. It has a picture of old Sparky, the old electric chair that one of the persons was executed in, one of the robbers. And all of that's
okay.
available for free, even if somebody doesn't buy the book. You can. It does have spoilers, though. It will tell you who the last man is. So I always warn people, if you want to be surprised, read
Yeah,
the
read it.
novel first.
Thomas Goodman, you are a good writer, that's for sure. And
Thank
I,
you so much.
it's been just an honor to talk to you because I get excited when I have a really great writer, and you are. And just do that. What I said, write up a whole list of your best sentences because you
That's a
should
good
have them.
idea.
Okay. When you do events, are you reading the first part of your book?
I do. I read the first page and a half. It introduces the four robbers without revealing,
Yeah, good. Yeah,
and so
because as a preacher man, you're probably good at reading because you have to keep your audience in church awake.
when we did the audiobook, I had a few people that wanted me to read to be the narrator, but I
Oh, that's
thought,
work.
oh, I
No,
got
no,
to. What's the old famous Clint Eastwood line? A man's got to know his limitations. So I hired somebody for that.
good. Again, Thomas Goodman writes, and he certainly writes, and he writes well. So thank you again for joining me. It's just been a thrill to talk to you.
Thank you, Patsy. Good to talk with you too.
Okay. Bye bye now. Bye. Wowzers. What a book. The Last Man by Thomas Goodman. It is a good book and really well written. For all of you people out there who are dreaming about writing a book, just look around. There's a story somewhere in your neighborhood. And that's what Thomas did, and he ran with it. Of course, it took him 25 years, but he's finally come out with a wonderful book. You rarely win these kind of awards that he's won for this book. Meanwhile, please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live. It is so much fun. I love talking to authors. It's just gives me such a kick. You know how to do it. Push that button. It only takes a minute, and I need subscribers because I'm having fun, and I hope you're having fun and getting inspired. Please subscribe, share, and comment, and really comment because authors need comments. They need some encouragement. And especially in these times, it's difficult for authors. So just write a lovely comment and it will be most appreciated. Thank you so much for joining me today on Joy on Paper Live. And please subscribe. Bye bye now.
Turn the house down.